Yeah, my editors here say don't say the word any longer. No, but it's true. There's nothing Republicans can't.
And it's not just Mays. It's not just the gadfly in this situation. Why did they rally behind Scott McGinnis?
But not only that,
who was a flawed candidate.
Because he had all the chits, because he had enough favors, and old school. The way that Republicans work is, you're next in line, you've got the favors, and the apparatus is there. The Democrats, thanks to Tim Gill and Pat Stryker, built something very different. The book, The Blueprint by Rob Whitwer and Adam Schrager really draw it out. Republicans don't learn from their mistakes, and I look at it. We spent, what, $3 million on McGinnis? Poof. To get nothing. But when you put it into infrastructure, at least you'd win that.
When you talk about vetting some of these minor candidates, these gadfly candidates, so to speak, though, I was talking with State GOP Chairman Dick Wadhams about this just yesterday, and he said, the complaint I keep getting is, why didn't you vet all of the candidates? Do you really want to put that kind of power at the state party level? I mean, isn't that part of what the whole Tea Party movement has sought to overthrow? Is that sort of puppetry?
Republicans are saying, why weren't these candidates vetted? Well, who the hell does vetting? There's no Department of Vetting in the Republican Party.
Exactly, and that's why the challenge becomes, and again, this isn't a criticism of major media, but if the mainstream media isn't going to do it, then it's left up to the sort of blogosphere, if you will. And I can just tell you from experience that it's a lot harder if you run a funny named blog. It's going to be a lot harder when you call a police department in Kansas to get them to take you seriously and to return your calls with significant information that you can report on.
No, it's true. In the first district, Diana DeGette is a clear favorite, and yet she has a very legitimate opponent, or at least a man who appears to be a very legitimate opponent. He's getting zero in scrutiny from the press.
That's a great point.
What if something suddenly happened, we found out something so scandalous about Diana DeGette that suddenly we look to the other party?
Yes, that's known as her voting record.
And then you find out that there's something also equally troubling about Mike Fallon, that once you dig in, you realize he's not the man he purports to be.
He's a doctor like Mays was a businessman.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. I mean, I don't have any reason to believe that that's the case. The little that I've talked to him or researched him, he seems solid. But you see the scenario. But then what do you do as a mainstream organization when you've been downsized by 30% and there are so many candidates out there? You do go with the ones that look like they're serious contenders. And for the longest time, we couldn't even decide if Dan Mays' name was Dan or Don.
And at the same time, your public is your readership at the Denver Post really is. I mean, they want more on the Senate race. They want more on the more hotly the fourth, the seventh, and the third. And so, why wouldn't you, if you're in the Denver Post, make the decision to put the resources that are hot?
So in other words, the investigation comes from third parties, and that's why the Tim Gill machine, the leftist machine, does very well. They were researching Scott McGinnis up and down. To find the plagiarism, I know it was reported on your paper, but something tells me that maybe the Denver Post was tipped off on this one. My guess is the Denver Post wasn't going through each and everything that Scott McGinnis wrote to check it against a library.
And some of that background. Well, remember, there were big questions about those water essays. They appeared on their face to be awfully light, awfully not worth $300,000 over 2 years. And Karen Crummy, the Denver Post reporter who was on that story, as soon as questions started being asked about those essays, I mean, the very day we found out more about those writings, she was on the internet trying to find them. She was calling the Hassan Foundation trying to get copies. So as I'm standing by the story that we weren't just tipped off, that we were doing legwork, we were working towards that story. Maybe she caught some lucky breaks down, on the path, but we like to say we make our own luck in that case.
Make our own luck.
But when you talk about some of this other investigating or other vetting of candidates, I mean, it's expensive if you're just Joe Blogger. Right. I mean, if you're going to start with someone, the first thing you would want to do is just run a comprehensive criminal background check. That would be thing number one, right? And at least in my mind, it would be. And a good check like that's going to cost you anywhere from $100 to $200, and you're blogging for free. You're not, you're not making that much money.
Oh, I hear the CompleteColorado.com brings in the cake.
Yeah, we've been around for 26 months, and I'm probably at the break-even threshold right now. And I've probably violated the minimum wage laws by how much time I've sunk into that and how much I've made.
No, but you're right about something you said earlier, which is if you're a blogger who's not well known, certainly outside your state, and you call up a police department or a government agency and you start doing some checking, you're going to get zero traction.
Right.
Unless you're very good at people skills, unless you can fund a trip out there and be hard to be told to go away.
Right.
If you can say that you're from the Denver Post or you know, the New
York
York Times or something like that, people get on the phone and they respond.
So, bring it back to the final point. So, Republicans, is this just a blip on the radar screen here, or is this the bottom from which the Republican Party rises again? I mean, there's no place to go but up after this kind of debacle.
One of the things I think that's interesting is now that the quote-unquote Tea Party candidate in the governor's race has won, and again, like I said earlier, there was sort of this feeling that in the Tea Party movement that it was hardline party politics that was messing up our system in the first place. I find it interesting that now the revolution has become the establishment. They're literally trying to draw a hard party line for everyone and saying, he's the nominee, you better well stick with the party and you better well vote for him. And so the fact that there's been this
never
schism,
go against the family.
Right.
I love you, Fredo. You're my brother, but never speak against the family.
Now that there is this dissent, and I think the Republicans will live through it, I think they will be healthier for it. And I think at least Republicans in Colorado may be willing to junk the GOP, it's my turn rule of thumb for candidates.
I hope that it's a wake-up call to the donor base, because we've got a lot of rich guys in the Republican Party, but we don't have guys like Tim Gill and Pat Stryker and Rut Bridges and Jared Polis, who will put millions and millions and millions of dollars in each year. We don't have that. So they pick candidates. I hope it's a wake-up call to Republican donors. They've got to change the way they give money.
I'll play the devil's advocate a little bit and say maybe the Republican
wear the
Party.
horns?
Maybe you can wear the horns. Maybe the Republican Party is not in as bad a shape as it thinks that it is, because if you look outside the governor's race, there are a lot of credible candidates and some that survived very tough primaries, and were not. And there wasn't a gadfly in sight. When you look at Buck and Norton, those were both serious candidates. Ryan Frazier has grown up a lot politically. He's still a young man. He's only 32. He's very convincing and very passionate about his views. And he was in recently and talked to us on the editorial board. Very direct, wasn't evasive. Had clearly thought through several issues. Brought up things that some of us even weren't aware of. So that's a promising candidate. I mentioned the Mike Fallons of the world, the Derek Schulers of the world. Ken Buck is a strong candidate.
But you're talking about federal guys. When I'm talking about state politicians, we've only got a minute left here. When I talk about state politicians, having the Republican pull over some the governor's office pulls over other people, the down ticket items, I'm afraid we're going to miss some of that.
I don't think so. I think Scott Gessler's in a position to run a strong campaign. I think John Suthers is too.
Scott is a very impressive candidate.
And you know, with this report that came out the other day that Bernie Busher has missed so much time in office, so I'll leave it at that.
All right. So I shouldn't throw away my Republican registration card just yet?
No.
All right. Todd Shepherd from the Independence Institute, Chuck Plunkett from the Denver Post, and thank you. Tune in late nights on 850 KOA to listen for me. Check out our webpage at independenceinstitute.org. Tell a friend. We'll see you next week.